Chapter 32 of Jurgen, A Comedy of Justice, by James Branch Cabell. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Jurgen, A Comedy of Justice, Chapter 32, Sundry Devices of the Philistines. Meanwhile, the people of the field had watched Pseudopolis burn, and had wondered what would befall them. They had not long to wonder, for next day the fields were occupied without any resistance by the inhabitants. "The people of the field," said they, "have never fought, and for them to begin now would be a very unheard-of thing indeed." So the fields were captured by the Philistines, and Chloris and Jurgen and all the people of the field were judged summarily. They were declared to be obsolete illusions, whose merited doom was to be relegated to limbo. To Jurgen this appeared unreasonable. "For I am no illusion," he asserted. "I am manifestly flesh and blood, and in addition I am the High King of Eubonia, and no less. Why, in disputing these facts, you contest circumstances that are so well known hereabouts as to rank among mathematical certainties, and that makes you look foolish, as I tell you, for your own good." This vexed the leaders of the Philistines, as it always vexes people to be told anything for their own good. "We would have you know," said they, "that we are not mathematicians, and that, moreover, we have no kings in Philistia, where all must do what seems to be expected of them, and have no other law." "How, then, can you be the leaders of Philistia?" "Why, it is expected that women and priests should behave unaccountably. Therefore all we who are women or priests do what we will in Philistia, and the men there obey us. And it is we, the priests of Philistia, who do not think you can possibly have any flesh and blood under a shirt which we recognize to be a conventional figure of speech. It does not stand to reason, and certainly you could not ever prove such a thing by mathematics, and to say so is nonsense." "But I can prove it by mathematics, quite irrefutably. I can prove anything you require of me by whatever means you may prefer," said Jurgen modestly, "for the simple reason that I am a monstrous clever fellow." Then spoke the wise Queen Dolores, saying, "I have studied mathematics. I will question this young man in my tent tonight, and in the morning I will report the truth as to his claims. Are you content to endure this interrogatory, my spruce young fellow who wear the shirt of a king?" Jurgen looked full upon her. She was lovely as a hawk is lovely, and of all that Jurgen saw Jurgen approved. He assumed the rest to be in keeping, and deduced that Dolores was a fine woman. "Madam and Queen," said Jurgen, "I am content, and I can promise to deal fairly with you." So that evening Jurgen was conducted into the purple tent of Queen Dolores of Philistia. It was quite dark there, and Jurgen went in alone, and wondering what would happen next. But this scented darkness he found of excellent augury, if only because it prevented his shadow from following him. "Now, you who claim to be flesh and blood, and King of Eubonia too," says the voice of Queen Dolores, "what is this nonsense you were talking about proving any such claims by mathematics?" "Well, but my mathematics," replied Jurgen, "are Praxagorian." "What, do you mean Praxagoras of Cos?" "As if," scoffed Jurgen, "anybody had ever heard of any other Praxagoras." "But he, as I recall, belonged to the medical school of the Dogmatici," observed the wise Queen Dolores, "and was particularly celebrated for his researches in anatomy. Was he then also a mathematician?" "The two are not incongruous, madam, as I would be delighted to demonstrate." "Oh, nobody said that. For indeed it does seem to me I have heard of this Praxagorian system of mathematics, though I confess I have never studied it." "Our school, madame, postulates, first of all, that since the science of mathematics is an abstract science, it is best inculcated by some concrete example," said the Queen. "But that sounds rather complicated." "It occasionally leads to complications," Jurgen admitted, "through a choice of the wrong example, but the axiom is no less true." "Come then, and sit next to me on this couch, if you can find it in the dark, and do you explain to me what you mean." "Why, madam, by a concrete example I mean one that is perceptible to any of the senses, as to sight or hearing or touch." "Oh, oh," said the Queen, "now I perceive what you mean by a concrete example. And grasping this, I can understand that complications must of course arise from a choice of the wrong example. Well then, madam, it is first necessary to implant in you, by the force of example, a lively sense of the peculiar character and virtues and properties of each of the numbers upon which is based the whole science of Praxagorian mathematics. For in order to convince you thoroughly, we must start far down, at the beginning of all things. I see, said the Queen. Or rather, in this darkness I cannot see at all, but I perceive your point. Your opening interests me, and you may go on. Now one, or the monad, says Jurgen, is the principle and the end of all. It reveals the sublime knot which binds together the chain of causes. It is the symbol of identity, of equality, of existence, of conservation, and of general harmony. And Jurgen emphasized these characteristics vigorously. In brief, one is a symbol of the union of things. It introduces that generating virtue which is the cause of all combinations, and consequently one is a good principle. Ah, ah, said Queen Dolores, I heartily admire a good principle. But what has become of your concrete example? It is ready for you, madam. There is but one Jurgen. Oh, I assure you, I am not yet convinced of that. Still, the audacity of your example will help me to remember, one, whether or not you prove to be really unique. Now two, or the dyad, is the origin of contrasts. Jurgen went on penetratingly to demonstrate that two was a symbol of diversity and of restlessness and of disorder, ending in collapse and separation, and was accordingly an evil principle. Thus was the life of every man made wretched by the struggle between his two components, his soul and his body, and thus was the rapture of expectant parents considerably abated by the advent of twins. Three, or the triad, however, since everything was composed of three substances, contained the most sublime mysteries, which Jurgen duly communicated. We must remember, he pointed out, that Zeus carried a triple thunderbolt, and Poseidon a trident, whereas Hades was guarded by a dog with 3 heads, thus in addition to the omnipotent brothers themselves being a trio. Thus Jurgen continued to impart the Praxagorian significance of each digit separately, and by the Queen was declaring his flow of wisdom was superhuman. Ah, but madam, not even the wisdom of a king is without limit. 8, I repeat then, is appropriately the number of the Beatitudes, and 9, or the Ennead, also being the multiple of 3, should be regarded as sacred. The Queen attended docilely to this demonstration of the peculiar properties of 9, and when he had ended, she confessed that beyond doubt 9 should be regarded as miraculous. But she repudiated his analogues as to the Muses, the lives of a cat, and how many tailors made a man. Rather, I shall remember always, she declared, that King Jurgen of Eubonia is a 9 days' wonder. Well, madam, said Jurgen with a sigh, now that we have reached 9, I regret to say we have exhausted the digits. Oh, what a pity, cried Queen Dolores. Nevertheless, I will concede the only illustration I disputed. There is but one Jurgen, and certainly this Praxagorian system of mathematics is a fascinating study. And promptly she commenced to plan Jurgen's return with her into Philistia, so that she might perfect herself in the higher branches of mathematics. For you must teach me calculus and geometry and all other sciences in which these digits are employed. We can arrange some compromise with the priests. That is always possible with the priests of Philistia, and indeed the priests of Sesphra can be made to help anybody in anything. And as for your Hamadryad, I will attend to her myself. But no, says Jurgen. I am ready enough in all conscience to compromise elsewhere, but to compound with the forces of Philistia is the one thing I cannot do. Do you mean that, King Jurgen? The Queen was astounded. I mean it, my dear, as I mean nothing else. You are in many ways an admirable people, and you are in all ways a formidable people. So I admire, I dread, I avoid, and at the very last pinch I defy. For you are not my people, and willy-nilly my gorge rises against your laws, is equally insane and abhorrent. Mind you, though, I assert nothing. You may be right in attributing wisdom to these laws, and certainly I cannot go so far as to say you are wrong, but still, at the same time, that is the way I feel about it. So I, who compromise with everything else, can make no compromise in Philistia. No, my adored Dolores, it is not a virtue. Rather, it is an instinct with me, and I have no choice. Even Dolores, who is queen of all the Philistines, could perceive that this man spoke truthfully. "I am sorry," says she with real regret, "for you could be much run after in Philistia." "Yes," said Jurgen, "as an instructor in mathematics." "But no, King Jurgen, not only in mathematics," said Dolores reasonably. "There is poetry, for instance, for they tell me you are a poet, and a great many of my people take poetry quite seriously, I believe. Of course, I do not have much time for reading myself. So you can be the poet laureate of Philistia on any salary you like, and you can teach us all your ideas by writing beautiful poems about them, and you and I can be very happy together." "Teach, teach! There speaks Philistia, and very temptingly too, through an adorable mouth that would bribe me with praise and fine food and soft days forever. It is a thing that happens rather often, though, and I can but repeat that art is not a branch of pedagogy. Really, I am heartily sorry, for apart from mathematics, I like you, King Jurgen, just as a person. I too am sorry, Dolores, for I confess to a weakness for the women of Philistia. Certainly you have given me no cause to suspect you of any weakness in that quarter, observed Dolores. In the long while you have been alone with me, and have talked so wisely and have reasoned so deeply. I am afraid that after tonight I shall find all other men more or less superficial. Hey-oh, and I shall probably weep my eyes out tomorrow when you are relegated to limbo. For that is what the priest will do with you, King Jurgen, on one plea or another, if you do not conform to the laws of Philistia. And that one compromise I cannot make. Ah, but even now I have a plan wherewith to escape your priests, and failing that, I possess a cantrap to fall back upon in my hour of direst need. My private affairs are thus not yet in a hopeless or even in a dejected condition. This fact now urges me to observe that 10, or the decade, is the measure of all, since it contains all the numerical relations and harmonies. So they continued their study of mathematics until it was time for Jurgen to appear again before his judges. And in the morning Queen Dolores sent word to her priests that she was too sleepy to attend their council, but that the man was indisputably flesh and blood, amply deserved to be a king, and as a mathematician had not his peer. Now, these points being settled, the judges conferred, and Jurgen was decreed a backslider into the ways of undesirable error. His judges were the priests of Veltino and Sesphra and Aegeus, who are the gods of Philistia. Then the priest of Aegeus put on his spectacles and consulted the canonical law, and declared that this change in the indictment necessitated a severance of Jurgen from the others, in the infliction of punishment. "For each, of course, must be relegated to the limbo of his fathers, as was foretold, in order that the prophecies may be fulfilled. Religion languishes when prophecies are not fulfilled. Now it appears that the forefathers of the flesh-and-blood prisoner were of a different faith from the progenitors of these obsolete illusions, and that his fathers foretold quite different things, and that their limbo was called hell." "It is little you know," said Jurgen, "of the religion of Eubonia." "We have it written down in this great book," the priest of Veltino then told him, "every word of it without blot or error." "Then you will see that the king of Eubonia is the head of the church there, and changes all the prophecies at will. Learned Gauleus says so directly, and the judicious Stevagonius was forced to agree with him, however unwillingly, as you will instantly discover by consulting the 3rd section of his widely famous 19th chapter. Both Gauleus and Stevagonius were probably notorious heretics, says the priest of Aegeus. I believe that was settled once for all at the Diet of Orthamar. Says Jurgen. He did not like this priest. Now I will wager, sirs, Jurgen continued, a trifle patronizingly, that you gentlemen have not read Gauleus, or even Stevagonius, in the light of Vossler's commentaries, and that is why you underrate them. I at least have read every word that was ever written by any of these three, replied the priest of Sesphra, and with, as I need hardly say, the liveliest abhorrence. And this Gauleus in particular, as I hasten to agree with my learned confrere, is a most notorious heretic." "Oh, sir," said Jurgen, horrified, "whatever are you telling me about Gauleus?" "I tell you that I have been roused to indignation by his Historia del Bello Veneris." "You surprise me. Still—" "Shocked by his Porno Basco Didascolo." "I can hardly believe it. Even so, you must grant—" "And horrified by his Liber de Immortalitate Mentuli." "Well, conceding you that earlier work, sir, yet at the same time—" "And I have been disgusted by his De Modo Quendi." "Ah, but none the less—" "And I have shuddered over the unspeakable enormities of his Eratopinion, of his Synodica, and especially of his Epipedesis, that most pestilential and abominable book, quiem sen horrore nemo potest legere. Still, you cannot deny—" "And I have read also all the confutations of this detestable Gauleus, as those of Zanchius, Faventinus, Lydius Vicentius, Legala, Thomas Geminus, and 8 other admirable commentators." "You are very exact, sir, but—" "And that, in short, I have read every book you can imagine," says the priest of Sesfra. The shoulders of Jurgen rose to his ears, and Jurgen silently flung out his hands, palms upward. "For I perceive," says Jurgen to himself, "that this realist is too circumstantial for me. None the less, he invents his facts. It is by citing books which never existed that he publicly confutes the Gauleus whom I invented privately, and that is not fair. Now there remains only one chance for Jurgen, but luckily that chance is sure." "Why are you fumbling in your pocket?" asked the old priest of Aegeus, fidgeting and peering. "Aha! You may well ask," cried Jurgen. He unfolded the cantrap which had been given him by the master philologist, and which Jurgen had treasured against the time when more was needed than a glib tongue. "O most unrighteous judges," says Jurgen sternly, "now hear and tremble. At the death of Adrian V, Pedro Giuliani, who should be named John the 20th, was through an error in the reckoning elevated to the papal chair as John the 21st. "Ha! And what have we to do with that?" inquired the priest of Veltino, with raised eyebrows. "Why are you telling us of these irrelevant matters?" "Because I thought it would interest you," said Jurgen. "It was a fact that appeared to me rather amusing, so I thought I would mention it." "Then you have very queer ideas of amusement," they told him. And Jurgen perceived that either he had not employed his cantrap correctly, or else that its magic was unappreciated by the leaders of Philistia. End of chapter 32.